do I want something out there? And this is a layer of work I need to get through and understand well to then move beyond it. And can I manage that? And can I get my values met in other ways in the meantime? Right. Through social connections at work, through extracurriculars, through whatever it is. Can I deliver well enough in the space that isn't a fit in order to get to the place that is a fit?
Welcome to Work, Learn, Repeat, the cooperative and experiential education podcast from the University of Waterloo, where we explore work-integrated learning and what's needed to prepare students, employers, and educators for the future of work. I'm the host, Jodi. Today, we're going to talk about values with Jennifer Woodside, Director of the Center for Career Action. So, Jen, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Center for Career Action does?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the Center for Career Action is a department that is here to support students, postdocs, employees, and alum in three major ways. So there's kind of the employment space, right, tactics, everything in there. There's the career strategy space. And then there's the lifelong learning, career development, further education space. These are not independent, like they're not silos, they're not mutually exclusive, but those are three major buckets. And so a lot of the concrete layers of work that would happen within that are that students or individuals would seek out supports that might connect to something really specific, like a resume,
right,
interview prep. What am I going to do about this decision I have to make? But the undercurrents of the work, regardless of those concrete entryways, often reside in the space of confidence building, learning about ourselves, and having just someone who, whether in a group setting or individually or through engaging with materials or curriculum in the classroom, where you're spurred to really wrestle with some of those assumptions you might have about yourself.
Right.
And, what do I care about? I thought I cared about X and Y, but actually Z is showing up as being something I really need to pay attention to more than I would have expected. So our unit is there to be a resource to support that kind of inner growth towards clarifying what it is we want to pay attention to as we set goals and as we start to take steps and take action in an uncertain kind of setting, which is the world these days.
And so that is a great lead into how your team goes about doing some of that value discovery with students that come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So values exploration is interesting. I mean, it's, I don't know if I already said this expression, but career development and values exploration is part of career development, a very big part of it. It's always important, but never urgent. Right. So just leading from that again, you can do it in quiet ways or you can do it in a really explicit way. So it might be a quiet way where we're working with a student or a group of students and we're hearing the words people are using. We're noticing the chat. We're noticing the kinds of questions that are coming up. If it's, a Q&A related to something going on in a course. The language people use often shows what they care about. So that's the quiet way. So noticing the stories that people choose to tell, the questions people choose to ask, where there's energy, where there's people saying, like, and they're, thumbs up on a comment. So that's one element. There's also more explicit values exploration, which would be, it can be really simple, like working with a checklist. You can go online and find some pretty decent checklists that are about values, things that you care about, and taking this big list. And you might think all of them are kind of important, but maybe there's 5 that you can distill things down to, or 3 themes where you bucket a couple of them here and here and here, and those become, your hypothesis for what it is you want to pay attention to as you set your goals, as you make some decisions, and then you iterate, and it may shift and change as your roles over across life change. They can adjust, and maybe you park one value for a very good reason for a while, and then you start paying more attention to it again. And there are also assessment tools that are pretty good at introducing models, simple models for thinking about how your interests and your values might map.
Okay. How do students then use their work integrated learning opportunity to further that value exploration?
Right. So the beauty of work integrated learning is that it is this wheel of action that disrupts the always important but never urgent narrative.
Right.
Because urgency gets introduced and you have deadlines and you are going out to have an experience and you need to decide what you want to aim to do. Then you need to go through these exercises of telling your story, and maybe it's through networking, interviews, all of that. And that cycle is kind of the ground. It's the ground upon which you can practice figuring out what you care about. It's like, wow, the story I want to tell about my last experience, the way I want to tell that story really taps into values in some way. Maybe I'm not going to say my values are, but maybe I am. Writing in a cover letter, that's a great way to show what it is you are most excited by when it aligns with what you're seeing the employer is excited by and the difference they're trying to make in the world. And so there can be a conversation there.
So what are core values?
All right. Core values are fundamental principles that we want to live by.
And how are those different than needs?
Values, you can think of them with respect to work in two categories. There's intrinsic values, like what you consider important in and of itself. So that might be getting to be creative every day, or getting to work towards change in some facet of work. They can also be extrinsic and about what something means for your life. So maybe about the work conditions that you want to be working within. It could be about pay.
Okay.
It could be about stability, any of those things. Those are things you consider to be important. Needs can be sometimes at a more concrete level.
Okay.
So what you consider to be important is one thing, and those values could be needs. Like you may need to be creative every day, or you feel like you're dying inside. You may need to connect with people, but they might be a little more optional, maybe.
Okay.
Needs, however, could be really foundational, like you need shelter, you need food, you need safety. But there could also be other layers that are related to your well-being, like I need to walk every hour for 10 minutes, or I need a flexible job to enable me to take care of a dependent, or what have you.
So last episode, we spoke with Anne-Marie Fannin from the Work Learn Institute about the Future Ready Talent Framework. And one of the clusters of competencies is around self-discovery. I'm assuming that's pretty important when we're starting to talk to students about values.
Absolutely.
Why is that so important?
Okay. Values they can be invisible at the beginning. So they're very individualistic or very individual.
Mm-hmm.
And they can, especially if they haven't been challenged, they can be invisible to oneself.
Okay.
So as we walk out into the world, it's the challenging situations and spaces where our values maybe are in tension with something that is being asked of us. That is where we start to get uncomfortable and we start to learn. We start to develop a mental model for where it is that we're operating and where we want to be and what those values might look like.
Okay. So do values change over time as we do some of this self-discovery, or are they always based there?
In developing one's career, as we get exposed to different spaces and we start to recognize where some of our boundaries are in vis-a-vis values, that is where we start to develop the ability to make decisions around how to self-direct through dilemmas, opportunities, how to identify something as something worth working toward, even if there are uncomfortable pieces, versus something that is just not for you. So over time, we can get better and better at defining for ourselves what we might use in our decision-making processes.
Right.
So the idea of developing our career decision-making abilities, the idea of, career development and lifelong learning, that whole area of skill is around becoming more and more aware of what it is that matters to us as we go out into the world and what it is that will help shape the right decisions that we can then keep moving from.
Can you provide an example of how you might find that mismatch in a workplace environment of values?
Many years ago, I had a few job opportunities to select from, and I chose the one that was most exciting to me in terms of the impact the organization was making on the field it was in and the world around it. So I went out very excitedly into that role and very quickly discovered that it checked off all these boxes around the impact I want to be part of making, but I had not inspected carefully enough what my role would be and what I would be measured by. But what it illuminated for me is it's not enough to be excited about the organization and where it's going. You have to also look at what you're going to be doing every day. And so that sharpened my concept of what a good fit for me was. And I recognized that I needed to ask myself different questions, more questions when I was assessing an opportunity. So that was a really good early career mistake that enabled me to make better decisions in the future. And when I think about it, actually from a supervisory perspective, like I would not have been a fun person to supervise in that space because I didn't care about the things that I needed to do. Like I knew I needed to do them, but I didn't love it.
That would be me in that situation as well.
Yeah, I didn't love it. And so I wasn't thriving. And so therefore I wasn't coming with excitement about those details.
And so what advice would you give to a student who is in a situation like that, where they realized that perhaps the organization fit their values, but the particular role didn't?
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma in some ways. But what I would say is when we encounter those kinds of situations, we have to back up a little and look at what comes after this. So do I want something out there? And this is a layer of work I need to get through and understand well to then move beyond it. And can I manage that? And can I get my values met in other ways in the meantime? Through social connections at work, through extracurriculars, through whatever it is. Can I deliver well enough in the space that isn't a fit in order to get to the place that is a fit? Or is it such a mismatch that, or maybe such a lengthy stay that one needs to, invest in that mismatched place that it's not going to be, a viable and maybe a rewarding career path? Like, is that something that might curb or help steer something in a new direction?
And I would think for co-op students that a 4-month work term can be a great period of time to try out that fit and see if it works. Or maybe, as you said, it's that opportunity to get the skills you need to get to that next step. And you find other ways to make sure that you feel fulfilled in your values.
Yeah. I mean, work integrated learning is so powerful in that it presents these opportunities to get into a space, a new people, new rhythm, all these things to sort out. Once the novelty wears off, often you start to understand, how do you fit into this space or into this field or into this whatever container it is that you perceive to be kind of your environment. You might realize through that you had assumptions you hadn't even understood were there.
So it's really like the work integrated learning experience can be really a way for students to help discover their values.
Yeah, absolutely. Because how else are you supposed to know? It's not, I mean, if you've had the gift of growing up in around people where you have a really, a great match in values, you might never have encountered that those are in fact your hard-held values.
Right.
And so how are you supposed to know? And so, there are a multitude of directions you can take, even with the very same skills, the very same interests, a wish to, be in the same kind of role. There are so many ways that you could position that. You could position yourself within completely different industries, completely different kinds of organizations that have, vastly different areas of impact in the world. All of that you need to, over time, you have to kind of unfold all of this or peel back the onion to figure out what are the core values for me that help me identify what's my space, what the space is that I can really thrive in.
So how can employers help employees discover those values?
Supervisors, managers, hiring managers, like we're people too,
Right.
who are also maybe in the process of unearthing what we care about still, because it doesn't really stop. Yes, they might be relatively stable over time,
Right.
but we still grow, we learn, and we encounter different phases of life that bring in new constraints, new challenges.
Different priorities of those values.
Priorities, yes. I've been thinking about this being partly connected to how we're measuring the performance of the person we're working with. But I think as at a more human level, there's also how are we engaging with them and what are we noticing? And are we asking questions to elicit from the person what they liked about that project, what they found most exciting about it, giving them a chance to process for themselves, and also you as a supervisor a chance to witness what it is what really makes them bring their best.
Right. And if we think of it this almost like a matchmaking service, how do we help employers find employees that have similar values and employees find similar values in employers?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the tactics. I mean, if you think about communication being a major vehicle for expressing values, like what are all the means by which we can express them? It is, how we are putting together our website, how we are showing up in the world, but also what kind of job description have we written? How do we run an information session? What is it that we're talking about? What is it that we're trying to inspire? What are we explicitly stating that our team or group cares about? That would be one area that you can aim to get it out there, to aim to appeal or recruit people who have an affinity to those ideas.
Okay. And on the flip side, if you're an employee, well, even before you're an employee, you're in an interview with an employer and you're trying to find that value alignment. What are some good ways for you to find that?
When I think about things from a job seeker's perspective, I would be looking at the job description and the organization's mission, vision, all of that, looking at what is it they value, looking for the evidence.
Right.
Get out the highlighter in your PDF, whatever it is, like actually take notes and identify what are the words that signify something and what does that mean to me?
And with work integrated learning experiences, you can try a couple of those out.
It's a mechanism,
right?
That like it's a structured way forward for trying something, learning from it, sticking with developing those skills over time, setting goals, and going at it again. And if you factor in kind of a values reflection along the way, then deciding and kind of planting your goalposts becomes an exercise that feels more and more comfortable, even if there's a lot of uncertainty, even if the labor market shifts, even if socio-political dynamics change where you could possibly go during a particular period of time.
Right. And so when we think about cooperative and experiential education and future-proofing ourselves, how are we thinking about values within our own unit?
One of the things that I think we could give more airtime to in cooperative and experiential education is that, yes, we are supporting career development through these different structured programs. And what that looks and feels like or what it looks like from the outside might be a series of tactical moves, like you prepare a resume, who's going to help you with that? And yet, I think what we offer is far deeper than that. So what is underpinning a great support around creating a resume is like weaving in the conversation about values, weaving in the noticing. What is it that this person is getting interested in or excited about, or is bringing like a shine to their eye or a different kind of tenor to their voice? It's that deeper reflective piece that it's harder to showcase,
right?
But that is underpinning a lot of the good work that we do.
And employers, like supervisors, can help with that when students are on their co-op work terms to also have those conversations so that it's not just when students are on campus, but in the field as well when they're actually doing it and seeing and getting the experience.
Yeah, because the experience is like, it's a values lab. It is a live opportunity to recognize and note to yourself. And for a supervisor to be able to help with that noticing, that's gold. So then for us, what can we create to support those supervisors to have the tools they need so they can support the students in the ways that dovetail with what we're doing to support the students?
Thanks for tuning into this conversation with Jennifer Woodside, Director of the Center for Career Action. Subscribe to future episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or you can watch the whole conversation on YouTube. All our social media platforms are in the show notes. Follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter to keep up to date on what's happening in cooperative and experiential education. Join us next time for Work, Learn, Repeat.